Yes, guys, it's time to wake up because flag crom might be happening here. They've got a giant forward line. They dominated this game from start to finish, and they've kicked 25 goals against the Bombers to kick off their season in style. It was an awesome performance from start to finish, as I said, but you look at that first quarter, they just really jumped the Bombers. They got in their face from a defensive point of view. Essendon was still getting on top, as they like to do. They've done that consistently under Brad Scott, get on top in the clearances. But those clearances are a little bit misleading. They don't seem to really amount to much. And the other team, if they can transition the ball half decently, they seem to be able to really hurt the Bombers. And this Adelaide team, with all of the offensive power that they have in front of the ball, were just absolutely way too strong for the Bombers. We're going to kick into all of that. We're going to kick into the players that really stood up for the Bombers, the performances that I thought were really disappointing from the Bombers, and also go through some of those Adelaide players because there were so many. I think for them, it was a real team effort, but there were still some standout performers amongst that as well. Essendon did win the clearances 40-37. Can you believe it? They really had no other statistical dominance in this game, but they really led to nothing, even when they were able to chain up by hand to try to generate a little bit of space around that kind of centre square area. They were always pushed back, hemmed back. They had high, big looping kicks inside forward 50. I think it was a combination of the players who were sort of chaining out to win those clearances for the Bombers and a lack of forward representation in the air. I thought Nate Caddy was really poor today. I think Harry Edwards, obviously an unbelievable debut. He kicks 3 goals, but overall that forward line just didn't really operate well for the Bombers. If I have a look at some of those midfielders individually that were racking up big clearance numbers there, you can see Elijah Sardis. He is a player that does get hit pretty hard from supporters about his lack of disposal efficiency, and that does stand up in this game. He had 11 clearances, but wasn't able to generate much cut through at all. 12 kicks, 13 handballs, but it's really what he didn't do from a scoring point of view. I mean, if you have a look at his heat map there, 70% of his possessions were in the back half. So he was able to win the ball with no worries at all. That's never been a problem for Elijah Sardis, but he's winning the ball too deep and then he's turning the ball over when he does get it as well. Disposal efficiency at 68 doesn't sound too bad, but when you put that with 13 handballs, 12 kicks, it's not really good enough to be only going at a 68% mark there. As you can see, there's 7 turnovers for the game. He had 1 behind, so he had the 1 shot at goal, but only 3 score involvements from that sort of a statistical game isn't good enough for Elijah Sardis. As I said, there was a problem with forward connectivity as well, but Elijah Sardis has to use the ball better than this at AFL level. Sam Durham was another player for Essendon operating at the coalface, and I think his game was much more productive just overall from the fact that he was able to get forward a little bit more. He is that more offensive type player. He's got a little bit more cut through. He can get into more dangerous areas when he breaks away from stoppage, and I think that does show up in his statistical breakdown. Just the 21 disposal, so it wasn't a huge game as far as accumulation is concerned, but you can see there from his heat map, I think a normal Sam Durham game, he'd be looking a little bit more forward of centre than this. 53% of his possessions were in the back half, but he was able to generate more cut through than someone like a Sardis, or even another big clearance winner for the Bombers was a Nick Bryan, and those clearances just weren't really going anywhere. Durham had 81% efficiency, so he was winning the ball and using it really well. And if you go down, it checks out with his scoring profile as well. He had 2 goal assists and 5 score involvements for the match. I just think looking at Durham as well from a visual point of view, he really attacked the opposition hard, and that can't really be said about all Essendon players in this game. He laid 4 tackles for the match, but I think he put on a lot of pressure. He's a big body in that midfield as well, so he gets limbs in there. He gets a few intercept possessions and stuff like that, and I think he worked hard, and he's in that small group of Essendon players today that can really say that they played well overall. I spoke there about Essendon's clearance dominance, but that did not equate to inside 50s. As I said, they weren't able to get much penetration on those clearances. Adelaide ended up winning the day there, 63-48 inside 50, so they had that territorial dominance, but how they were able to get that was all from their transition work, and I really want to point out here Wayne Miller. I thought he was... I made a video actually on the Adelaide Crows and how their team is shaping up in 2025, and I called on Wayne Miller. If he's able to be fit across this season, I just think he is a halfback flanker here for Adelaide that can be that key distributor. He uses the ball really well. He's got silky movement, and he pushes forward, and in this game, he was able to affect the scoreboard. Actually, from just a raw goals point of view, he actually had a really nice finish from outside 50. He was also able to link up set up play, and he probably faded out of the game a little bit towards the end, but when the game was really on the line in those early quarters, I think Wayne Miller's class really shown out today. And to get 2 goals out of he and Mitch Hinge as well, I think that's really productive for Adelaide. If those guys can be, really get up the ground, be offensive threats, it puts pressure on those smaller forwards for Essendon to really chase them back. I think they really had their work cut out for them, playing on these sorts of guys and having to cope with what they can do from an offensive point of view as well. But 2 players I really want to signal out here for that ball movement part of the game, that transition football, is Jordan Dawson and Ben Keays, because they were absolutely imperious today. Jordan Dawson had 33 touches. He had an enormous amount of meters gained. It was somewhere up around 700. He was just involved in almost every chain. Anything meaningful that Adelaide did from that back half sort of 50 zone, they moved the ball so fluidly. Pretty much everyone in the Adelaide team has an enormous disposal efficiency today. It's in part how they move the ball, their kicking skills. I think they look like they've really improved overall as a team, but also we do have to point a little bit to Essendon's pressure that just wasn't up to AFL standard to stop that today. But Dawson was absolutely, he almost is, as a midfielder, as a running player, unstoppable at times with some of the assets he has. He has pretty good speed to burst away from stoppage. He's a really good endurance runner, so he can get around the ground and really stretch opposition mids that have to go with him. And then the size of him as well. He's a big body. He's a marking player. He's a lever that Matthew Nicks can pull from a point of view of playing him through the middle. He can win those contested possessions. I'll actually bring up his heat map here and you can have a look at it. He's won a lot of contested ball inside that centre circle, but then look how wide he gets to drift out and take some big outlet marks for the Crows as they come out of defence, but also be a forward threat as well. And to have a magnet like Jordan Dawson and then an up-and-coming player also like Dan Curtin, I think it's going to stretch so many teams this season. And as Dan Curtin improves, it's going to be mega. So as you can see there for Dawson, 775 metres gained. He had 8 score involvements and 1 direct goal assist. So everything that Adelaide did from a meaningful point of view really came through Dawson. And he's just the barometer of this team, isn't he? He's a real captain. It's funny to think that a few years ago that he came over from Sydney and he's just had such a presence on this football team. Now, the other one that I did want to point out there was Ben Keays, who I just thought he is just such an underrated player and a player that plays this high half forward role so well. And I think with the inclusion of Alex Neil-Bullen, who didn't have a huge game today, I think he really, when he had an opportunity to hit the scoreboard or something like that or get involved in chains, he took it. But he's just a worker bee. He just gets up the ground and he facilitates so other players can get involved. And I think we'll see that this year with Keays and Alex Neil-Bullen and Rochelle. Sometimes one will have a big game and the other one will do a lot of facilitating, take a more difficult matchup, and it'll just kind of change from week to week. But today it was Ben Keays who had 22 disposals and kicked 4 goals too. Essendon just didn't really have a player, particularly around stoppages, like forward half stoppages. They didn't have a player that could live with him. But on those big defensive half transitions that Adelaide were winning and moving the ball quickly, Essendon sort of looked like they didn't really know what to do, and they were kind of preoccupied with some of the tall players like Fogarty, like Thilthorpe. They had 2 guys running to him, and then it just left so much space for players like Ben Keays to get into. And we know how much of a hard runner he is, a hard worker. He'll outwork his opponent and he just gets into those pockets of space. He's a really clever player, a really functional player, and someone that just, if you give him half a chance, he'll hit the scoreboard. And he did that today and he punished Essendon as much as he possibly could, really. This is an absolutely absurd stat sheet here. He's gone 76% of his possessions, which is 22 of them. That's a high number for a forward half player. 76% in the offensive half. And the disposal efficiency of 82% is absolutely incredible to be operating in a compact area like the forward half. It does show, though, how much when Adelaide moved the ball, because of that clearance dominance of Essendon, when Adelaide did move the ball, it was often big, swift attacks from the defensive half and space opened up for Ben Keays to be able to play in. 435 metres gained as a high half forward is incredible, and 11 score involvements, meaning that a lot of what Adelaide did from a positive point of view went through Keays. And in contrast to that, for the Bombers, when Adelaide had those sort of clumsy, dirty ball clearances come to that back flank area, Essendon just weren't able to punish at all. I think this Dylan Shield experiment is going horribly wrong. I think his composure was really off today. I thought even some of his efforts at the ball, just when there was those loose balls on the line, I think he looked nervous on the ball. He didn't kick the ball particularly well. I'll actually have a bit of a look into his statistics because I'm a bit scared for him here. 21 disposals for Dylan Shield, but look how far he was pinned back into that defensive half of the ground. 90% of his disposals came in the back half of the ground. I thought he was pretty sloppy with his kicking. I don't have a kicking efficiency number on him here. It says he went at 86%, but a lot of that was by hand. He's 21 disposals, 8 kicks and 13 handballs, so he wasn't able to get out into space, hit up targets and help Essendon to control the football like they really wanted to. You look at his score involvements there. Not a lot of cut through there, just the 3 overall for the game and 0 goal assists. So no scoreboard impact for Shield. And when he's your primary ball mover from back there, you're going to struggle if he's only having 3 score involvements. When we do talk about the control side of the game, Adelaide absolutely dominated the Bombers in this one. I want to draw your attention to the marks column. 59 marks to 129 is absolutely insane. It's a complete one-way traffic as far as controlling the ball by foot and getting those uncontested marks, but it's just a complete domination. Marks inside 50 with 20-7. You're not going to win many games of football like that, and Adelaide's forwards just absolutely gorillaed those Essendon defenders today. I thought Ben Mackay was really poor. Zach Reid had a tough day out. I know he hasn't played much football, but it wasn't really strong enough there on Fogarty. And then Tex Walker also really got off the chain. He was big for Adelaide as far as score involvements. Those contested marks 14-7 overall. So a complete aerial dominance from the Adelaide Crows, but also just a ball control. So that's your contested marking, your strength, but also your ability to find targets around the ground to get those uncontested marks. And shows a lack of work ethic from the Bombers to not, cut off those channels. I think today, if you looked at the team, you'd expect that Essendon were a better running team overall with the positional play, the more of a micro small forward line that they had, but they just weren't able to go with these big key position players, and then they outdid them with the ball as well. Any concerns that Taylor Walker wasn't in the best 22 were pretty much put to bed today. I think he had 11 or 12 score involvements for the game. I think he worked really hard up the ground and made space for players like Fogarty, like Thilthorpe. His field kicking really stood out as well. So when he was picking the ball up around that 50 arc, he was able to hit targets. And you start to look at some of their tall players. You look at Worrell in the back line who can find targets really nicely. You've got Fogarty, who's a really good field kick. Thilthorpe's a great field kick as well. And they seem to be all really athletic, good runners, good ball use. Tex Walker goes straight into that mix as well. So you lose a bit of mobility with a player like Tex, but you sort of gain something with the way that he moves and the field kicking. But you sort of gain something with the field kicking that he brings. He's able to open up the field just, without the necessarily having that amazing mobility of someone that's in their mid-30s and playing key position forward. Going up the other end, I think Essendon's forward line, it's really hard to go chicken or egg here. Was it Essendon's forward line not functioning, or was it just a poor delivery? Up the field, they weren't really able to move the ball with any swiftness at all. It just looked really convoluted. The chains weren't happening. So it's hard to know who to blame fully here, but they definitely looked a little bit disjointed without Langford in the side. You had Caddy, who sort of lacked representation today. I thought Edwards obviously that's an amazing debut by any player to come in and kick 3 goals. I think he really tried hard. He worked hard. I guess you could maybe level at Edwards that he's not the biggest key position forward, so it's difficult for him to sort of muscle out in some of those big marking contests. And then when they don't have Langford there, they're sort of lacking a bit of size. There's no Peter Wright in this side as well. As far as the representation from the smalls, I thought Isaac Kako clearly had a more difficult day today. A matchup like Michelini, who would just smother those best small forwards. I think he had an amazing game to keep Kako quiet. But one thing that you can give to Kako is the fact that he just keeps working hard. And you saw in that third quarter, in that last quarter, when the game was sort of dead, Isaac Kako still was able to stand up and take his moments. And I still think you would put Isaac Kako in one of Essendon's biggest triers today and one of their best players, along with Zach Merritt, Edwards, probably Durham as well was another one that tried really hard today. And I think Isaac Kako, you got to give him that. And he still looks like the most dangerous forward. And that is really a big talking point for the Bombers in this game. Just not enough contributors across the board. I thought Merritt was amazing. I thought Durham tried really hard. I mentioned Kako, but there was just so many players for Essendon that I can't even remember them being there. Like, where was Archie Perkins today? So I don't know what Harrison Jones was doing on a wing. I mean, if he's not marking the football and being a presence inside forward 50, is he really good enough with the ground ball stuff to operate on a wing? I don't really know. Ben Hobbs, I thought Nate Caddy was really poor as well. And probably Gresham inside that forward 50. Like, Kako looked like the leader down there, and I'm not sure what Gresham's doing when Essendon are really under the pump. He's got to be standing up. He's got to be getting more of the ball and playing better overall. But overall, I really want to focus in on the Crows here because they were absolutely incredible in this game from back to front. I think that defense is so underrated. Nick Murray was great today. I thought Keane had some mistakes in him for sure, but he does give them a lot of flexibility back there. Worrell's incredible. He had the most intercept possessions for the game. I'm not sure of his intercept mark number, but I think that's a real improvement for Adelaide. I talked about the small defenders. I think Laird was pretty good from a defensive point of view. Didn't get as many touches today, but if Miller can sort of play that more offensive role along with Hinge, I think they're looking really stacked back there. And so much flexibility in that midfield now with players like Rankin able to step through there. Peatling is a depth player. Sid Draper comes in off the bench as well. And they were even able to bench Rankin in this game. Dawson, what a utility he has become. He is just everything to this side. And then forward of the ball, a player that I haven't talked about at all who's just turned into a baller in 2025 so far is Josh Rochelle. He was just incredible today. His score involvements are through the roof. He's creative. He brings players into the game. And I'm just not seeing any weakness at all in this team overall. And I think the only thing that can kind of stop them on going on a big run, pushing deep into finals this season would be an injury crisis. So let's hope that doesn't happen for Crows fans. But as good a start as you could have possibly hoped for at the beginning of 2025. Thanks for watching this video, guys, and I'll see you next time.